So I did some online research about Elias.
And what did you find out?
Through my research and looking online, I found that Elias was known to be quite the screamer.
Did the screaming worry you at all?
It did a little bit. It's my job to make sure that everything set up for MTS goes well, and so I wanted to make sure that everything would be fine. So I decided to pay a visit to Danny Kozak's sanctuary to make sure everything would be fine.
When did you go to the sanctuary?
I believe I went on June 18th.
And what was it like when you arrived?
To me, it was very surprising. It was not what I expected at all. I walked into the visitor center and there was no one there. There was a window boarded up. It was very
Objection, Your Honor. More prejudicial than probative.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
What was it like when she arrived at the animal sanctuary that day?
And could you explain your objection a little more in detail, counsel?
Yes, Your Honor. What this witness is stating is the state of the sanctuary that when she visited in June. And this is a more prejudicial than probative value because there's no probative value in the state of the sanctuary as we are talking about June 29th, 2017, and the incident of that day. The prejudicial value of this statement substantially outweighs the probative value and might conflict the jury.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
My witness testimony is highly probative as it goes to show the animal sanctuary escaped 11 days prior to the attack. Now it is the plaintiff's belief that the defendant was desperate for money to save the sanctuary, and that made him act reckless and careless. Therefore, it's highly probative for my witness to testify to the state of the sanctuary 11 days prior, being in such desperation and disarray with walls boarded up, no employees working there, in complete disarray.
What rule are we looking at, counsel?
403, Your Honor.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
403.
Thank you. The objection is that the testimony would be more prejudicial than probative. And I'm reading from the rule which states, the court may exclude relevant evidence if its probative value is substantially outweighed by a danger of one or more of the following. And then we have a laundry list of potential problems. As to this particular objection, I find that the potential for undue prejudice is not substantially outweighed by the relevance, so the witness can answer. And to be clear, the objection is overruled.
Could you repeat the question, please?
What was it like when you arrived at the sanctuary?
So when I arrived at the sanctuary, I walked into the visitor center and there was no one there. There was a window boarded up, and I could feel the dust seeping into my pores, and I didn't see anyone. Just a parrot, which squawked at me, and I really hate birds, and so I tried to get out of there as fast as I could. And I walked out of the visitor center towards an auditorium.
And what did you see when you walked into the auditorium?
When I walked into the auditorium, I saw Danny and Elias practicing.
And can you tell us a bit about what you saw as they were practicing?
Yeah. So Elias was sitting in a chair, and Danny was standing a couple feet away. Danny would do a hand signal, and then Elias would do a cute reaction, like bury his face in his hands or shake his head.
And what happened next?
And then after each time that Elias did a trick, Danny would walk over and hand him a piece of fruit. But then Danny did one particular hand motion. He did a thumbs down, and that's when everything changed.
What do you mean everything changed? What happened after the defendant made a thumbs down hand motion?
Well, Elias jumped out of his chair, and he rushed towards Danny and grabbed him really tightly around the middle.
What did the defendant do about it?
He just said, "Oh no, Elias, you're supposed to shake your head."
And what happened next?
Since it seemed to be a break in the rehearsal, I decided to walk up to Danny and introduce myself.
What did the defendant appear like?
He seemed a little bit surprised to see me, but then we discussed his upcoming performance.
And what did you guys talk about?
I questioned whether he would be ready for the performance, and he assured me that he and Elias would be ready for the performance on June 29th.
At this point, what is Elias like?
Elias was still holding on really tightly to Danny, like a 29-year-old model onto her contract. So, yeah.
Okay, moving forward to June 29th. Were you on set that day?
an intern to print out extra copies of Danny's guidelines. I really felt that SES was ready for rehearsal.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, counsel. Ross,
Yes, Your Honor.
go ahead. Yes, please.
Good morning, Ms. Clark. My name is Elena Carr, and I'll be asking you a few questions on behalf of my client, Mr. Kozak.
Good morning.
Now, you are the talent booker for Midlands Afterguard, correct?
That's correct.
And you corresponded with Mr. Kozak about his appearance with Elias, correct?
Yes, that's my job as a talent booker.
And so you booked him for June 29th, 2017.
Yes.
And usually Miss Grace is very involved with the booking of the talent, correct?
She sometimes is.
That Miss Grace was involved with booking Mr. Kozak and Elias, correct?
Yes, she was. Alex was actually the one who recommended Danny and Elias to me.
Now, usually Miss Grace is very willing to give their talent anything that they wanted, correct?
Yes, we always want to make sure that everything runs smoothly for the show.
And Mr. Kozak had sent a set of safety guidelines to you, correct?
That's correct, yes.
He sent these before the day of the taping?
He did, yeah.
But with these guidelines, you mentioned that Miss Grace found it difficult, it was an uphill battle to get Miss Grace to give Mr. Kozak what he wanted, correct?
I might have said that, yes.
Now I'd like to move on to the preparation that you took. So for hosting Mr. Kozak and Elias on the show, you suggested to lock down the studio, correct?
I did suggest that.
That to also not tape with a live audience?
I did suggest that. We hadn't had an animal on set before, and I personally had never worked with an animal on set, so I didn't know what was appropriate or not.
And Miss Grace was the one to say that this was overkill, correct?
She did say that, but then she suggested that we hold a rehearsal to prepare beforehand.
Now, before the day, you contacted a friend of yours that was on safari trip, correct?
That's correct, yes.
They had worked with Elias before,
Yes.
and they informed you that Elias was completely harmless, correct?
They did inform me of that, but they also mentioned that Elias screamed a lot on the show. That is what concerned me a little bit.
So that's a yes to my question, that they informed you that Elias was completely harmless.
Yes, but they did not dissuade my fears.
Now, I'd like to move on to this meeting that you mentioned on direct examination. This meeting was an informal meeting, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Many people did not attend.
Most of the staff was there, but a few had prior engagements.
Ms. Grace herself did not attend.
No, she didn't, but she already had the guidelines from the emails with Danny.
And Ms. Thornhill did not attend.
No, but she should have had the guidelines as well.
And during this meeting, some of the writers asked if they could order lunch for the day of the taping, correct?
They did ask that.
Now, you did not see the relation of that question to the guidelines that you were currently going over, did you?
There was no mention of lunch in any of Danny's guidelines.
So you did not see the relation of food itself to the guidelines, did you?
Not specifically, no.
Now I'd like to move on to the day of the event, June 29th. You can't tell us when the writers ate lunch, can you?
No, I can't. I woke up that morning with a splitting headache, and I could not move. The light hurt so much, so I decided it was best for me to stay home.
Do you also cannot inform us if all of the guidelines were followed on that day, can you?
No, but I'm sure that the preparations were there.
So that's a yes to my question, that you cannot ensure that all of the guidelines were followed.
Like I said, I wasn't there on the day.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Your director.
No, Your Honor, I asked that my witness be excused.
All right, please, please step down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Willoughby Hawkins this morning. Excuse my attire, just rushed here from the lab.
No problem.
May I
Go ahead,
proceed?
counsel.
Can you please state your name and spell your last for the record?
Dr. Willoughby Hawkins, Hawkins.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I'm currently the chair of the Department of Anthropology at Midland State University,
and I spent my time teaching and performing consulting work.
How did you get into this field?
Well, I've loved animals my whole life, and then I just fell in love with animal science in school. I attended the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga and received degrees in psychology and biological anthropology, and then I went on to The Ohio State University where I received my PhD in animal sciences.
After school, what did you do next?
Well, actually, during my doctoral program, I spent 2 years conducting field research at a chimpanzee sanctuary in New Jersey. And for the last 20 years, I've spent my time teaching undergraduate and doctoral classes in animal psychology and primatology.
How are you involved in the case today?
I was retained by the plaintiff to critique and analyze the training methods employed by Mr. Kozak when preparing for chimpanzee Elias to appear on Miss Grace's show.
I want to talk more about how you conducted your investigation. What resources did you have?
I reviewed the affidavit of A.J. McClellan as well as the depositions of Alex Grace and Danny Kozak, and I also examined several pieces of evidence, including a biography of Elias, an autopsy report of Chris Viafana, and several emails between Danny Kozak and the MTS staff.
So during an investigation, do you have a particular way you go about analyzing this information?
Yes, I do. I use a specific methodology called exhaustive comparative analysis. Essentially, I take a baseline list of best practices common in my field to select and train a chimpanzee for a TV performance. And then I looked at the commonalities and disparities between Mr. Kozak's choices and this best practices list.
And did you use this method for the investigation today?
Yes, I did.
Now I want to talk more about this best practices list. What specifically is it?
This is the commonly accepted way that chimpanzees and other primate species are supposed to be selected and trained for a TV performance. If it would help, I have prepared a chart of these best practices.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Your Honor, permission for my witness to step down and make use of a demonstrative?
Yes, go ahead and proceed.
Now, Dr. Hopkins, I want to focus on the side that says subject selection first. What are these 4 categories?
Objection, Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, this improper testimony may be heard.
Yes, proceed.
Your Honor, pursuant to case law Davis v. Adams, an expert witness must meet all 4 prongs of Rule 702 in order to be qualified, and it is my belief that this witness has not met prongs C and D, specifically the reliability of the methods and the error rate or confirmability and reproducibility of these methods, and if I may volunteer.
Any objection, counsel?
Yes, may I respond briefly?
Go ahead.
So under 702, sorry, one moment.
Take your time.
Yes, so according to case law, Terror Readers Association of Midlands v. Merrill Down, 1994, in assessing the reliability under Rule 702C, which is opposing counsel specifically referring to, they should consider whether the theory or technique has been tested. But, for example, lack of publication does not automatically foreclose admission. Sometimes well-grounded, but innovative theories will not have been published. So there is no definitive checklist. Because of this, the methodology of Dr. Hawkins is admissible in court today and does qualify under Rule 702C.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, pursuant to the case law Terrorist Readers Association of Midlands v. Merrill Dow, the issue regarding error rate is left to the discretion of the judge. However, my objection is not simply to the issue of error rate, but rather the fact that the witness does not mention exhaustive comparative analysis as their methodology in their expert report that they prepared for testimony today.
Your Honor, may I respond on those grounds?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, exhaustive comparative analysis methodology is not specifically named in the report. It is clear that this is the method being used throughout the report because she frequently refers to this best practices list when analyzing the subject selection and the training methodology of Danny Kozak. It's inherent in this report and intrinsic to it.
Counsel, would you care to ask a couple more questions of the witness to address defense's objections, or would you care to proceed on the arguments alone?
I can ask a few more questions to lay foundation.
Go ahead.
Dr. Hawkins, is your methodology common in your field?
Yes, very much so. A lot of other experts I've known use this methodology as well.
And have you used this in other investigations?
Yes, I have.
And has it been reliable in those other investigations?
I believe it definitely has been reliable in other investigations.
Now, I want to talk about the subject selection and the categories underneath.
Just a moment, counsel, you can rule on the objection. The way I read Rule 702, it looks to me like it's a sliding scale. And since the witness has testified to the court's satisfaction in fulfillment of the requirements of Rule 702, I'm going to respectfully deny, I'm going to respectfully overrule the objection, and the witness may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel.
So, again, let's look at subject selection. What are these categories underneath?
So we have age, gender, previous environment, specifically referring to when the chimpanzee was introduced to humans, and finally, prior aggressive behavior.
So, according to these categories, what would be an ideal subject?
For age and gender, an ideal subject would be a female chimpanzee under 5 years of age. This would mean they're physically weaker than male chimpanzees and less aggressive than male and older chimpanzees.
And what about the other two categories?
Well, for previous environment, it's best if a chimpanzee is introduced to humans just before entering puberty. This would mean that they're physically weak enough to still consider humans as their physical superior. And finally, for prior aggressive behavior, if a chimpanzee has shown any hostile tendencies in the past, they are not considered an ideal subject.
So, was the defendant's chimpanzee ideal according to age?
No, he was not. Elias was 10 years old on June 29, 2017, so he was physically stronger than a female chimpanzee, and he was physically strong enough to be dangerous to a human.
Dr. Hawkins, would you like to mark the demonstrative?
Yes. I'll mark an X there.
And was the defendant's chimpanzee ideal according to gender?
Well, again, Elias was not ideal. He was a male subject, and so he was statistically more likely to be aggressive, and he would have been physically stronger than a female subject of the same age. So again, I'll mark an X there.
Was the chimpanzee ideal according to previous environment?
Well, Mr. Kozak purchased Elias in 2013 when he was just 6 years old, though you can never really own an animal. This also would have been when Elias was first introduced to humans. However, I was unable to determine whether Elias had entered puberty before or after this point, so this test is inconclusive at best. So I'll just mark a dash through there.
And was the chimpanzee ideal according to prior incidents of aggressive behavior?
Well, again, Elias was not ideal. During a 2015 TV show performance, Elias began screaming on stage for 15 minutes, and he refused to leave. This certainly would have been a red flag for Mr. Kozak in deciding to bring Elias on another TV show. So again, I'll mark an X there.
Dr. Hawkins, I want to turn our attention to the other side of this list, the training methodology. What is type of operant conditioning?
So this is essentially how you train a chimpanzee, with either rewarding good behavior or punishing bad behavior. Now, positive reinforcement, that is rewarding the good, is by far the best way to train a chimpanzee. It's not only more humane, but it's also more effective and less likely to inspire aggression.
Would you like to mark the demonstrative? Oh, sorry, I apologize. Did the defendant do this?
Yes, Mr. Kozak did use positive reinforcement when training Elias. So I'll mark a check there.
And let's look at the next category, initial reinforcement schedule. What is this?
So this is how you should first train the animal. Trainers should begin with what we call a continuous schedule. This means that every time the chimpanzee performs a desired action, they're given a food reward every time. But again, this is just how you should start to teach the trick.
And did the defendant do this?
Yes, Mr. Kozak began with a continuous schedule. So I'll mark a check there.
And let's look at the final category, final reinforcement